All right, joining me on the program right now, Sarah Parshall Perry, Vice President of Defending Education. How you doing?
I'm doing great, and I think this is going to be a good outcome for the parent petitioners in this case, because I heard some real hard questions, but to a very good lawyer who, I got to tell you, doesn't have much of a legal leg to stand on.
You know, I said that as much as I support and agree with the religious argument, I don't think it's the best one. I think we should be talking about age appropriateness here and the role and rights of parents, because conceivably you could see parents saying, well, so, my religion doesn't want I don't want my kids learning this or learning that or whatever it is. I think this should be all. You could be an atheist and still think this is inappropriate. But what we're getting from this, though, and I got your piece at Real Clear Policy right in front of me, we'll get to it, is the lawyer who, by the way, and I'm not trying to armchair Gorsuch, the justices should actually admonish him for not knowing what year. You're the lawyer representing the school district, and you don't know what year they start teaching sex ed. That's a problem. You can't play. You can't go stupid.
Me too. I got to tell you, there were a couple of sort of inadvertent gotcha moments, and I don't think the conservative justices were out to really hammer Schoenfeld down. He's the attorney for the respondent, Montgomery County Public Schools. I don't think they were out to nail him against the wall, but I got to tell you, there were a couple of questions he should have automatically known the answers to. And it's very interesting to me because Gorsuch pointed out, and you heard that colloquy, Gorsuch was very calm. He was very genteel in the way he presented it. He said, listen, you allow students to opt out of human sexuality in 4th or 5th grade, but you've inculcated these kinds of materials in English class for kindergartners. So explain that disparity to me. And of course, Schoenfeld couldn't.
Well, the thing is, he was playing stupid, and you don't play stupid in front of the Supreme Court. But what Gorsuch ferreted out there, when he says, well, when you have a teacher in front of the class, it doesn't make a difference. Yes, it does. If you have a general education teacher, so before you go to middle school, depending on what grade that is, in my daughter's case, it's 6th grade. When I was in school, it was 7th grade. You go from a single education teacher to each subject having its own teacher. So, but when you're talking core education, if this is the English part of it, then you're still graded by subject, even if you have one teacher. So if you're in 2nd grade and you have, your first lesson of the day is English, your second is math, your third is science, your fourth is history, and then maybe you have reading time, lunch, gym, art, music. Your core curriculum courses are still graded by the subject. So if you fail Pride Puppy, you fail in English, not in whatever else it might have been in.
Yeah, and let me tell you, this county school board is a traditional bad actor. These guys have actually been to the Supreme Court twice this term. A lot of people didn't recognize there was a pending cert petition in a case on some of these gender secrecy policies. They were one of the first school districts in the entire country to inculcate these exact policies where they are actively lying to parents about the gender identity of minor children. That was a case not taken up. They denied the petition for cert. Justice Alito dissented from the denial of that petition for cert and said, this is an issue of growing national importance. We're going to have to wrestle with this at one point or another. And we know at Defending Education, we've actually conducted the studies and we are keeping the running catalog. More than 12 million students are in public education formats with these policies. So it wasn't the first time Montgomery County was before the Supreme Court, but these guys have absolutely no love for parents who are objecting to a juggernaut of sexual politics. Again, these are kids who are 4 and 5 years old, and all the parents are saying is, we're not challenging the curriculum. That, I've seen NPR's headline. They've classified it as a case determining, who gets to determine curriculum, the Supreme Court or the school board. That is absolutely not it at all. They are asking for rights to opt out because it conflicts with their desire to organize and direct the religious upbringing and education of their kids. It is a de minimis impact on the public school system. And what you heard was a lot of pushback from the Montgomery County school system who said, it got to be unfeasible, but had no explanation for why, other than we think it makes the kids who are still in the class feel stigmatized.
Well, they say this is about empathy. Okay, you're supposed to teach your own kids empathy. But what I noticed, though, I read Pride Puppy. It's an ABC book. Now, I don't understand the necessity of Pride Puppy. There are completely innocuous, A is for Apple, B is for ball, C is for cat, D is for dog, E is for egg. Traditionally we've done the ABCs without any controversy, right?
Right.
And now they're saying, well, we have to use this Pride Puppy book because it's an ABCs book. No, it's not. It's an indoctrination book. And what's happening now is that also when you're dealing with 3 and 4-year-olds, these are not, look, I said earlier in the program, if you're talking about high school and you're talking about the gay, straight alliance, whatever, high school students have a maturity, obviously, not an adult maturity, but not the maturity of a 3 and 4-year-old. The 3 and 4-year-old wants to please the person at the front of the room for the most part. They are taking this as what they're supposed to think. 3-year-olds don't know how to filter out things. 3-year-olds don't know how to use reason and objectivity and think critically because they're 3 and 4 years old. And it seems like that's the goal here, to get in at the earliest stage of development and then have some of these children say, well, I can be in the wrong body, or I want to be a princess, even though I'm a boy. I read this book, Knight and Prince, targeted at 4-year-olds. The target audience of the book is 4 years old. Now, they're going to say we're looking for book bans, like they said in Florida. If you want to go out and buy your kid, you want to go to a bookstore and buy your kid this book, that's up to you. This is taxpayer-funded education that you're using to manipulate children.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. I think Justice Jackson tried to keep pushing and pushing to try to get Eric Baxter, who's the counsel for Beckett's Fund for Religious Liberty, who was representing the parents, to say, listen, it's just mere exposure to these things. How do we even know they're being used in the classroom? And, we don't even know if this is something that they're mandatorily exposed to. He had to counter and said, we have affidavits from the parents. These were included in at least 5 sets of separate education during the course of the year. She continued to push him. Listen, if it's a share, sort of a book that's on a shelf somewhere in the public school library, that's a separate constitutional discussion. But when we're talking about mandatory curriculum that, as Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett referenced, is designed to change the minds and perspective of these minor kids. And in fact, terms like disrupting either or thinking, disrupting heteronormativity and cis normativity, those are the types of terms you hear when there is an ideological push to make an individual change their perspective. And as you so rightly pointed out, these children at this age are, for all intents and purposes, educational guppies. They are in the formative years of their neurodevelopmental states. They are looking to the next possible authority figure, which after a set of parents is invariably a school teacher, right? That's the next authoritative figure that these minor children are exposed to. And when they're peddling information that is directly contrary to what these kids are hearing at home, there has to be an opportunity to opt out.
I'm not a violent person, and I would never do this. I'm just saying this in theory. You kind of want to grab some of these people and go, tell me why you so badly want to show this to kids. Just tell us the damn truth. Okay. Well, it's just, we just happened to choose Pride Puppy. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. Stop pretending this was just all innocuous. It's just a book like any other book. Stop it. You have an agenda here, and I say it on this program all the time. Sickos, perverts, and weirdos are coming for your kids, and people get upset when I say it. Tell us why you so badly want to bring homosexuality into the classroom of 3 and 4-year-olds. And don't say, well, some kids have 2 mommies and 2 daddies. That's a different thing. Okay, that's a totally different thing. There is no reason for you to expose all of the children to this against the wishes of their parents unless you got an agenda.
That's 100% right. We are now using terms like grooming. And, it's a term I think a lot of people are sort of queasy about because it sort of, indicates that this is an active process. But the longer that I have been, not only in Washington, D.C., but studying these issues, a parent of 3 children myself, I have to tell you, this is an active ideological guerrilla warfare tactic. They are getting children at the youngest ages, and they're getting them because, as you and I just discussed, they are incredibly psychologically malleable. They are open to various interpretations. They don't, they don't have this heteronormativity or cisnormativity that the sort of progenitors of the trans agenda are talking about. They're very open to how they are led. And what we're seeing is an active campaign to change the thinking of minor children so that they are divested from what their family values are. And by that, I mean the values that their parents, regardless of race, ethnicity, religion, want to inculcate in them. And these educators are suddenly finding themselves essentially acting as parents, right? So in loco parentis, the Supreme Court said, listen, you send your child to public education, educators, the school acts in loco parentis, in place of parents for a short period of time during the day. They've got sort of a custodial role for these minor children. They have administrative oversight for these children. But as a federal court just said in the Third Circuit, we've got to remember in loco parentis does not mean replace parents. And I think there are some educators, and especially so the school board in Montgomery County, that has clearly forgotten that.
When did we vote to, government-run education is supposed to be a service. And over the years, government-run education has taken on more of an authority that I don't think we ever vested in them. I understand that, they have to be able to discipline unruly students, but we've seen over the years where schools are reaching out. And look, when I say this, cyberbullying is pretty terrible. We had a case in the school district where I live where a middle school girl was bullied so bad she took her own life. And there's no debate, win or lose, that could ever give that family their daughter back. They have an organization called Mallory's Army. And she was a cheerleader. She was a gymnast. She was, I guess, a relatively popular kid. But I don't know the source of the bullying. But the schools are going after kids who, let's say, might be cyberbullying another kid, if they're using a school device, that's one thing. Just because what the kid is doing wrong doesn't give the school the authority to discipline them in school. And
right.
we had a situation in New Jersey where a dad took his two kids to a firing range, and the school suspended them for violating the school's zero tolerance policy on weapons because they saw the Facebook posting. Now, what kind of insane, where would they get the authority to reach into the home and say, you're violating our policy? I'm not in school. I'm not on school grounds. I'm not using school device. If anyone wants to look that up, I'm not making it up. And it was a big case in New Jersey where the school suspended two boys because of their zero tolerance weapons policy when they saw that the dad had posted the picture of the boys shooting at a firing range. The schools have granted themselves more power over our children than we've ever voted to give them.
Absolutely. And part of the problem is we're dealing with the vestiges of an administration that took a collectivist approach to parent-child relationships, to child rearing. When President Biden said they are all our children, when he platformed the AFT and the NEA to keep schools closed across the country because that's what the unions wanted, that was the sort of, I think, first rock in the falling avalanche. And it's impossible with 90% of American school kids in public education across the country to stick our finger in enough holes in the dike to be able to stop what we're seeing as an onslaught of ideologues and critical race theory, critical gender theory, and these sort of many despots who believe that they are better suited to raising our children than we actually are. In fact, Randy Weingarten of the AST has said nearly as much. These are individuals who are drunk with the power of believing it is their job to train and raise little Marxist agitators, and they are starting earlier and earlier. And then they know that once they get them into higher education, academia is largely lost to liberal influences. Now, some schools stand alone. Many of the schools in the SEC, my son is at LSU, but they are certainly not devoid of their sort of influx of woke ideology platforms. But there are really sort of getting these kids at the young ages. It shows how aggressive they are being in a directed campaign to make sure they are changing the worldview of these children from the very first moment they set foot on this school campus, and parents are having to wrestle back control. It's not going to stop. In fact, I think we're only going to see more of this.
Well, if the school choice movement needs any advertising, there it is. And my producer just shot me the article from NJ.com. It was actually that one of the students posted a picture of himself at the range on Snapchat. Another kid screenshotted it and showed it around, and the school suspended the kid. So it was in Lacey Township, New Jersey. True story. That a student was suspended for going to the range with his dad. So the schools now are, in loco parentis, again, we never voted to give ultimate authority to governments. And I don't call it public. I'm going to tell you something. I don't call any of this stuff public anymore. And I'll tell you why. And I hope my dying accomplishment is we stop calling it public school or public transportation or public health care. It's government, because we're all part of the public, but we're not all part of the public. I mean, the government. So when something fails, they go, well, the public failed. No. We didn't fail. You failed. Okay, it seems like what happens is we establish a service that we want to spend our tax dollars on. Then these people go, well, we're part of government now. We have authority. We can act like a government. No, you're a government service. You're not a government. There's a difference. You serve us. Now, one of the funny things, we're going to run out of time here, is that with, which clip is this? With, we've kind of covered the topic of your piece here, I think, that's in the Real Clear Policy. One of the clips that we have is the Kavanaugh? No. Kavanaugh. The Kavanaugh clip is very short. The lawyer Schoenfeld says, we can't let the kids opt out because there's too many of them. Cut one.
Right.
In the country has opt-outs for all sorts of things. The county has opt-outs for all sorts of things. The other Maryland counties have opt-outs for all sorts of things. And yet for this one thing, they changed in mid-year and say no more opt-outs. I'm just not understanding feasibility.
So again, I think what's in the record is that with respect to these books as they were deployed in the classroom, there was high absenteeism in some schools. For example, dozens of students being opted out in, I think Mr. Baxter said the average size of an elementary school in Montgomery County is 700 students. So each grade is 125. If you have dozens of students walking out, making arrangements for those students to have adequate space and supervision and alternative instruction, I think is infeasible.
But they do it for all sorts of other opt-outs.
Essentially, he's saying, I guess we can't use the cafeteria, the library, the gymnasium, and have, teacher assistants or the gym teacher or somebody. There's just, what he's really admitting to, there's just too many parents that don't want their kids seeing this stuff.
Right, shock it all, right? And he's already said you've got opt-outs for other things. You already got opt-outs for human sexuality. And by the way, he also mentioned opt-outs for dissection units in the higher ed sciences class and opt-outs for certain types of field trips. And yet, when you eliminate the right as religious parents to opt out from this clearly age-inappropriate material, which clearly pushes the worldview, that can look nothing but religious hostility and religious animus. And the justices said as much yesterday. That, to me, is going to be a slam dunk for the parents. I am glad to be sort of predictive in this respect. I think we've got a 6-3. 5-4 at the very least. It's very clear if Ketanji Brown Jackson and Cindy Sotomayor are not going to vote with the conservative majority. And Kagan's a wild card. She actually may vote with the conservatives on this one.
Yeah. Well, again, no matter how this pans out, conservatives need to run for school board. And I can tell you right now where I live, I remember we had a school board election and we had, for some reason, they didn't have the school board candidate debate in our town. They had held it in the next town. I guess maybe, I don't know if there was anything behind that, but I watched the YouTube and the one woman's like, I just moved here from New York City and I want to run for school board so I can create a safe, inclusive, and diverse. And I was like, all right, I'm not voting for you. And all right. And I remember talking to other parents. This woman won her seat by 26 votes. 26 votes. Because a lot of people didn't vote down. They didn't pay attention. They voted for president, they voted for Senate, and they got down to the local thing. They kind of just petered out because when you saw the vote tallies, it was like, here's as many votes as it was in the district, and then here's how many votes they got for school board. You didn't even vote. You didn't even click on it. You just let 26 votes separated. That now that's one seat, and I don't think it's had much of an effect. But I'm just saying, most people don't really. And who has time to study? Every candidate, right? And let's be honest, who has time for this?
Well, and you know what? I said to anybody who will listen that school board elections are literally the most important elections in the country because education at the most granular level has got to be reclaimed because we can do everything we want in Washington. And Trump's done some really good things. He's talking about dismantling the Department of Education. He is reassessing the accreditors and their DEI initiatives that actually rubber stamp the education formats for all higher education institutions. He's gone back to sex-separated sports and Title IX. But what has to be done at the ground level is so much more labor-intensive than what Washington is able to accomplish. We know the Constitution envisions things like education have to be done at the ground level, closest to the individuals that they affect. These school board elections are truly the most important political races in the entire country and will be for some time going forward.
All right, I got to leave it there. Sarah Parshall Perry, Vice President of Defending Education. She's got a great piece at Real Clear Policy on realclearpolitics.com. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right.